Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean Tobias, coming to you live from Reviv's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. I'd like to welcome Tech Mahindra President Lakshmanan Chidambaram to the Reboot Chronicles, part of a $21 billion Mahindra Group, one of the largest multinational federation of companies in the world. Tech Mahindra is a leading provider of technology, consulting, and digital solutions with about 145,000 people, helping some of the world's biggest companies around the globe. As president of the Americas and America's Head of Mahindra Group, he has represented the company at the World Economic Forum, the Wall Street Journal CEO Council, and is a board member of the U.S. Indian Business Council, which is a great group that I've worked with both in Silicon Valley and around the country. Lakshmanan, good to see you.
Good to see you as well, and thank you for your kind introduction.
Oh yeah, I could have gone on and on with your bio. We'll make sure we put a lot of comments for people who want to dig into it. You got a great background. Do you have a nickname you go by? In the States, we all have nicknames. Mine's Dean. It never changes, unfortunately.
Yeah, mine is CTL. Some people find Lakshmanan Chidambaram too long. So, at the starting of my career, they put my initials, which is a C and a T, and my first name, which starts with an L. And someone called me CTL, it just stuck. So feel free to call me CTL.
I like it. Though I do like your first name. It's pretty cool. Lots to talk about. Lots going on in the world in terms of global competitiveness, supply chain, all types of things about Factory of the Future we want to talk to you about. Maybe just to kick it off. So Mahindra Group, massive multi-billion-dollar, one of the largest. I'll just call it family started company in the world, and those. Your parents are in like massive amount of industries, like 20 different industries, everything from aerospace, defense to automotive and logistics, real estate. Are you like, because is the Tech Mahindra Group like consulting better in those categories? Because you've got this inside track, or you kind of operate in those as well as consult?
Well, let me, Dean, introduce the Mahindra Group at a very high level quickly. There are three pillars of business. We actually started doing business in 1945, and the first business of the group was to recondition Willys Jeeps left behind after World War II. Right, and India needed rugged vehicles for commerce to thrive, so it was a noble cause. The group has grown extensively, and there are three pillars of business. The first pillar is core engineering and manufacturing. We make two-wheelers, four-wheelers, six-wheelers, eight-wheelers, small aircrafts. We are the largest tractor manufacturer in the world in terms of numbers.
Number three, you guys are famous for your tractors, actually.
Oh, absolutely. And so that's one pillar of the group. The second pillar is information technology, which is Tech Mahindra. We operate at the intersection where information technology, business process, core engineering, and networks meet. We operate at that intersection. And as you said, we are 6.35 billion in revenues, 145,000 people worldwide. And the third pillar is a host of industries. Mahindra Finance is India's second largest non-banking financial company. Mahindra Holidays and Resorts is the second largest holidays and resorts chain in the world after the Marriott. And we can go on, right? So there are a number of industries we operate in. And we believe that, Tech Mahindra works very closely with many of the companies in the Mahindra Group to develop world-class solutions, platforms, frameworks, which we innovate at the right price points in India and then reverse innovate it into the developed world, right? And as I was telling you before, the Indian consumer is very punishing. All the global players are there, and the Indian consumer wants the best at the lowest possible price. So we said, why not use that, as a testing bed to develop the best solutions, leveraging the latest technologies to make, Mahindra successful, and then reverse innovate it to make our customers globally successful. And that's why, I run the Americas operations for Tech Mahindra as well as the Mahindra Group, because we believe this synergy is very important.
Total synergies, yeah. I mean, you guys are gurus in a lot of those sectors. Why not leverage it? Yeah, it's pretty smart, CTL. When you look at the issues around the world right now, let's kind of go after a few of them, especially the work you've done with the Indian Business Council. The whole globality thing about what are companies doing about their existence around the globe. So multinationals are they don't talk about this very openly. They definitely don't talk about it on the news channels, but they've got a China problem, and I know people trust you to help them figure out everything from their factories to supply chain to IT to customer integration and all that stuff. But maybe let's pick apart some of these. And what are you seeing? What are smart companies doing about the China problem?
Before I talk of the China problem, in general, there's a lot of imbalance in the world, Dean. 70% of commercial shipbuilding happens out of three countries in the Asia Pacific region.
Yeah, and just a
China,
couple companies. That's right.
yeah, China, South Korea, Japan, right? And as you know, the whole world is dependent on Taiwan, which is a small island, for their chips, and everything is chips. One of the vehicles at the Mahindra, the latest one is called the XUV 700. It's an SUV. It uses 250 chips, right? And so we're so dependent, right? And Taiwan recently went through a drought.
Isn't Taiwan like 90% of chips still?
Yes. Just think of the imbalance, right? And then
Wow.
coming to your question on China, um, U.S. corporations are so developed countries in general are so over dependent on China, and for a long time because for the right reasons, right? China supplied reliably at scale and at the right price, right? And so it was like that Kool-Aid, sucked people in, and they became so over dependent. To the extent that one of our customers, their single largest market is the US, 92% of their sourcing is China. And
Wow,
recently,
way too
people,
much concentration.
way too much. And organizations fortunately have woken up to this reality. And China will continue to be an important player in the world supply chain, right? I mean, it's not going to go away. But I think
Right.
at least 15-20% should shift, right? And so to that extent, we are playing a role in identifying projects that can be moved out of China. We do should costing, and we identify suppliers across the world. India is one important base. Mexico is another very important base from a US perspective. But so, are Vietnam and Malaysia in a smaller way, right? And so we've moved supply chains now, and 15% of all of Apple's iPhone is now being made in India. So I think you'll see the supply chain shift for all the right reasons, and the supplier ecosystems will develop. But still, there are going to be some challenges, right? Because China is a market leader in rare earth minerals. So if you're doing batteries for electric vehicles, you don't have a choice but to get these from China today. It's unfortunate, right? And so, across the globe, we need to develop multiple different sources for many of these components that are required to get the global supply chain more balanced. And we're doing a lot of work in that space as well. And number three, as supply chain shift, the Mahindra Group, has launched a program where we call helping with supply chain end to end, where Mahindra World Cities, they own 3,000 acres each in different cities in India, where it's walk to work, right? You can set up factories, there are hotels, there are police stations, there are schools, everything, right? So
Everything. Yep.
supplying the land, getting permissions, statutory permissions from the government authorities, building the factories, and then Tech Mahindra providing the IT solutions, Mahindra Logistics providing the logistics. So that way we are helping consumers ease of entry into the Indian market, in a much better fashion.
Yeah, the whole China thing. When we were kids, we saw the big thing in U.S. business anyway. '60s and on was like made in Japan. Everything was like made in Japan, and that had a bubble, and eventually turned into other countries, and then China took over. Now we're seeing because of the lack of IP protection and the rule of law and just all kinds of issues, a lot of shifting to India and the other countries you've seen. And do you see China kind of going the way of Japan, or is the ship just sailed so large that it's not going to kind of have a decline phase that some people are predicting?
I think so, simply because one factor, age, right?
Mm,
The average age, because of the single child policy, it's becoming a more mature economy, so to say, right? 35 years old on an average. If you
right.
take India's population, 70% of India's population is under the age of 27, right? And so one is age. As you go forward, I think that's going to play a very big role. And then IP protection, right, is second. Third, English language speaking skills, are far more deeper, from an India perspective.
That's
And
huge. Yep.
and four, I think the US government is realizing that too much dependence is also wrong, right? Too much dependence on any country, whether China or India. So, but I think at this point in time, that rebalancing will happen. It's not going to be just price, but it's a combination of quality, price, availability, and correcting the imbalance, right? And so we believe that a few countries in the globe are well positioned to kind of benefit from that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You don't hear about anyone outsourcing their call center to China. I mean, way back in the day, call centers were like in the Midwest because we didn't have much of an accent there, and then they kind of started going to other countries. We've had the head of Teletech, one of the largest contact centers in the world, on, and so it's interesting to see how the Indian economy started with that, and then slowly moved it more into tech. And we don't want to help with tech; we want to be tech, and the investment there is it's amazing. You described like the city of the future where it's all just how do you build enough capacity. You almost have to build cities and ecosystems around factories. What's the factory going to look like? What's the factory of the future? I know you guys are building a lot of secret projects there. What's it look like?
And Dean, I would love to invite you to come and see it. There's nothing secret about it. We are, showing it to the world, and there's nothing like touching and seeing, right? Many times people open up their iPads and say, "Oh, here is a digital twin," right? And
Yeah,
we felt that the best is to, create a living lab, and we've created this at Chakan, which is Mahindra's largest plant. 13,000 people come into work every day. It's a city by itself, right? And when you
it's a
walk,
city.
yeah, it's a city. When you walk into the plant, we've leveraged technologies like AI, uh, augmented reality, virtual reality, computer vision, so on and so forth, to make the factory intuitive, intelligent, safer, and energy efficient, right? So from a sustainability perspective, it's a great story, right? And while you're going on this direction, you reduce cost, so it's a win-win. And I'll explain to you, how this works. When you walk in, it's got one of the state-of-the-art paint shops in the world. And there are multiple vehicles which are coming in. First, there is an SUV, then there is a pickup truck, right? So when the SUV comes in, it gets painted and moves out. When the pickup truck comes in, automatically, without any manual transfer, manual intervention, the plant would know, leveraging computer vision, that a different vehicle is coming. And in almost zero time, the settings are changed and the paint is ready. The paint shop is ready for the pickup truck now, right? And so that happens. The
I've never heard of something so agile.
Oh, absolutely. And the second is earlier, it goes through an assembly line, right? And you'll find that there are different vehicles. First is again SUV, the second could be a pickup truck, the third could be something else, right? And
Yeah.
as it goes through the assembly line, we find that we call it no fault forward, right? And so every time let's say a worker is tightening a screw, we call it applying the right torque, and they don't apply the right torque, the assembly line comes to a halt
That's right.
and they fix the problem once and for all. They do a root cause analysis so that it never ever happens again. It gets into training, right? And that type of a thing. So what happens is when the vehicle is fully finished, earlier they used to run the engine for half hour to test it. Today, with all the no fault forward that's built into the assembly line, we have done away with this testing altogether. Just imagine how much fuel has been saved totally. And then look at safety. Someone should wear a hard hat in a particular area, they take it off. Computer vision detects that. And then automatically, it points it out and, then the training happens and we make sure that it never happens again, right? And so all this, means that, you use extensive robotics. Now you don't need lights in the factory. The robots are ready, they work by themselves, they don't need lights, right? And so this is use of energy in a great way. All these plants use water so effectively. water recyclization, rainwater harvesting. So you should just come into this plant and experience it. It's a responsible corporate citizen. It saves energy, makes the world a better place, and it saves money. And we are now working on 14 use cases, Dean, which will double the capacity of the plant with the same resources.
And this is both for Mahindra corporate as well as your clients. You guys are
You're
doing
right.
this all over.
So now what we did was we said, why not we innovate? We do it because Mahindra is a tough client, right? They want this at the lowest price because they have to deliver a vehicle at the lowest price, a state-of-the-art vehicle. So we said we'll use this as a base to develop state-of-the-art factory of the future operations, and then we will create a digital platform out of this and reverse innovate it into the developed world. When we did that, we said, oh, many of our competitors are talking about this, so we don't know whether they are ahead of us. So Tech Mahindra has a deep manufacturing practice, right? I mean, we do IT work for clients like Bombardier and Ford, and a whole lot of Fortune 1000 corporations, Navistar, and so on and so forth. So we went and met some of them, and we found that the Mahindra's Chakan plant is way ahead in terms of implementing digital technology, leveraging digital technologies. And we feel that there is so much good that can happen by bringing
Right.
that into the US and the developed world. And that's what we're
You
doing.
know, when I talk to the leaders of some of your competitors, everyone from McKinsey to Accenture to Deloitte, you name them, alphabet soup, I get a lot of telling, but not a lot of actually building this kind of infrastructure. So a couple thoughts, totally off the rails here. It's like, what? Because you are an auto manufacturer and farm implements, and the U.S. used to be the big three. Now it's the big two plus Italians, right? So, but the imports is just turned into an amazing business. Probably started with the Germans way back. But why don't we see a lot of Indian cars in this country?
That's a great question. The Mahindra cars are sold all over Latin America.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Now,
Yeah,
all over Latin America, South Africa, the African region, and obviously they're market leaders in India. The US, we were supposed to start operations, right? And there was a hitch with dealer agreements, but we have a plant that we've put up in Detroit. It's the first plant to come after a decade in Detroit, and
yep.
it's called Mahindra USA, and we make an off-road vehicle called the Roxar, ROXAR. You should Google it up. It's a
Oh, I've seen this.
when you
Yes.
when you buy your own, as a hobby farmer, when you buy your farm, that's a vehicle you're going to use inside. It's a great product, and so they've started with the Roxar. I think it's a question of time before those vehicles come into the US market.
You're right. And so what you just described is a factor. I mean, we are not a very old country. We're not like Germany, for instance. But when you go around and tour our factories, you've been in most of them. I've been in hundreds around the country. They're not that cool. They're old and decaying. So Ford's building a new one down in Tennessee, and they've got all these. But as a percentage of modernness, we're way behind as a country. And you look at India and China, it's like, well, everything's shiny, brand new, and they can build it faster, better, cheaper. Just the plant I'm talking about itself, not to mention the the level of automation and non-union and competitiveness. And so, how do American companies become more competitive?
Fortunately, with all automation that's coming about and with what technology can deliver, leveraging AI, extreme
Right.
automation, robotics, I think that will level the playing field a bit, right? And that is what the US should leverage on in order to become more competitive, because the US government is also very clear that manufacturing has to start in the US, restart in the US, right?
Right. Right.
Did you hear there's a Taiwanese company that's a major that's putting up a chip plant in Arizona, for example. Intel has started another one with government subsidy in the Carolinas, right? And so it's coming, right? It's
Yeah.
not if, it's already coming.
I thought it was Ohio, but yeah,
Sorry,
major
maybe you're aware.
subsidy,
Maybe. Yeah, you're right.
trillions. Yeah.
Brilliant. And so, if I think that using technology very effectively and getting automation to do a lot more work, robotics automation to do a lot more work is going to be very crucial. And that is why we believe that what we are talking of in the factory of the future is going to be very relevant for US companies to be competitive in the US market, to manufacture in the US and to deliver this to US consumers.
That's totally why I asked it. Your first point about, hey, there's too much concentration, there's too much imbalance, there's 5 companies controlling many industries. Well, that's happening even in our companies. Take media and tech companies. But yeah, I think that does level the playing field a bit. It's ours to lose. You know, fascinated by your personal story. You've been through a lot. You've lived everywhere. Run all different types of companies. What's your journey been like? What kind of personal challenges and reboots have you faced?
The first was moving to the US. I moved
Oh,
in '99, and
oh,
at that
and now,
time,
was that India to Boston? Is that where you
you're
first
right.
moved?
You're right. India to Boston, and it was funny,
Uh,
right?
that's
Someone asked me where I was going, and I said Boston, and they fell off their chair because
anyway. No, you
I'm,
could move anywhere from the U.S. to Boston, and it's culture shock. I
it's
can't
because
imagine.
in Chennai we have three types of weathers. Chennai is in the southern part of India where I live. It's hot,
Yep.
hotter, hottest. And Boston is probably cold, colder, coldest. So, but
I don't
anyway,
know. I grew up in Chicago, so I think yeah, we have a lot of those coldest cities.
but anyway,
Oh yeah.
I
What
moved
was it
there,
like?
and it was, exciting because it was a new culture, new business. The US is a great market, and merit is always recognized, and so it was exciting for me to get into this market. And this is my, you know, 22 years, 23 years. So now I'm as American as can be, but it's been very exciting. The journey has been very exciting. But what brought me here, when I came here, I was very influenced by my grandfather. He started doing business when he was 13 years old, and he was extremely successful. And there was one thing that we learned from him. The word you give is more important than any document you'll ever sign. Right? That's how he lived his life, and we all grew up watching him. And if you give a check and it bounces, you're as good as dead. In his time, they gave checks. And when I came to the US, I said, oh, it's such a legalistic society. Does all this matter? And after spending these 22 years, I feel that that is as relevant when I learned it in India as now. It's all about, the customer gives you something priceless. You have to deliver world class services. But at the end of the day, the customer gives you something priceless, and that's trust. Everything is trust, right? And in any large complex projects you do, there are going to be bumps in the way. They want to be with a partner who's capable, but who's trustworthy, and who they know is there with you on the long journey, right? And so what I learned from my grandfather, has served me good right through. And you have to be driven by purpose, right? And I've been, this is my 13th year in Tech Mahindra and the Mahindra Group. And, we have a RICE philosophy, right? Which is, the RICE tenets that drive everything we do. It's like RICE for a more equal world. And as I think about our RICE philosophy, and we've created a subculture within Tech Mahindra. And we said, if there's only one thing that you do in your professional life, you don't have too much of time to do many things. If there's only one thing, what you would do. And the more we thought about it, we said the one thing would be customer delight. And then everyone said, it's so cheesy. Everyone says customer delight. What do you mean
Yeah.
by it? And we said, we thought about it deeply, and we said, customer delight means doing what is right for the customer, even if it is detrimental to tech, right? And then we said, we have to do a number of things to get there. One is that we need to have happy people come into work. We have delivery centers all over the globe. And when people come in as leaders, our job is to create environments which are non-political, where people can travel the distance between good and exception and realize a better part of themselves every year, right? And so we are training our managers on how to get this culture implemented, and we constantly measure it. This is number one. Number two, digital technologies. In 10 years, they've taken over the world. We didn't have AI. We didn't have AR, VR,
No.
5, 6 years ago. And so and they are changing businesses. So our job is to train our people on digital technology so that we can hold our customers by the hand. We know the customer's legacy environment, we know their domain very well, and we know digital technologies very well. Putting all of this together, listening to our customers, bringing in our knowledge from the wider market, and coming up with products, frameworks, solutions that can help our customers win in the marketplace. This is number two, right? And number three, we always say operational efficiency is very important, and we call it all round clean performance. right? When you negotiate a legal agreement, you really, cross the T's and dot the I's. But once it is
Right.
done, you never reopen it, right? The moment the customer reopens it or you reopen it, the relationship is gone. And we have never reopened a customer. In my business, we don't have a single legal case, right? And so those are all culture building things, which I think is very important. And this, we've done it,
Those
it
are
takes a
great,
long time.
great, great values. Yes. You know, we had the CEO of Zoho on, a little smaller than you, maybe 10%, so a billion versus 21 billion. And that's how he's keeping that culture alive. How do you do what you just said? $21 billion in revenue, thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees, thousands of clients, different industries, all. How do you actually keep that culture globally?
That's a great question. It's not easy. And it takes time, right?
Or is that the wrong question? I mean,
No, it's a very
is there
right one.
more than
It's a very
is there
right
more
one.
than one? Maybe is there more than one culture?
No, it is one culture. If it is not one culture, it will not succeed, right? And so what it
Ah,
does is you have to
wow.
repeat, you have to keep your vision simple and repeat it again and again and again till it gets into the DNA of your people. It's like brushing your teeth when you wake up in the morning, right? First thing. And
Yeah,
how do you do it? I travel 3 days a week. I meet with our customers. I do town halls, right? And my leaders do town halls. Communicate constantly. Listen, right? I think the most important thing is to listen to our people. When does
right.
happiness come? When they feel that you're wanted. You can't solve all your problems, but if you're a good listener, right, that's the first step, right? And then not doing the wrong things. And I'll give you one example. We work with a large Canadian bank. We had 1,000 people do testing. And we said, someone came up with a brilliant automation idea that would bring down 1,000 people to 500. Everyone celebrated, but the person who had the P&L for the account woke up and he said, "My God, my revenue would drop by half. My profitability would drop. Our incentives would go down." And so they came up with a brilliant suggestion saying, "Oh, let's do it, but let's do it over 3 years. That way the customer gets a benefit and we don't lose everything on day one." And we let it bubble. And then we said, what did we say was our culture? We will do what is right for the customer, even if it is detrimental to tech. And we said, implement this. We took care of incentives and we did this. That account was 48 million 8 years ago, Dean. Today it is 160 million Canadian.
Wow.
You can't go wrong by doing what's right. There was a dip, the revenue went down, the profitability went down, but the trust went up. The customer
Yep.
says, now I can trust these guys. They have my interest at heart. And that is priceless, right? And so that's, it is by standing up. Everyone says, right? All children are good in life, right? And parents sometimes what they say is they say
Yeah.
something outside, but inside they act differently and the child watches it, right? And, they learn bad habits, right? And so that's exactly how an enterprise is run. And that's how we are implementing our culture.
And that goes back to what you said before. It's like it is one of the issues with American competitiveness, and quite frankly, you could say the same thing about European companies. Is myopically focused on quarterly returns leads to short-sighted, not so honest decisions in the revenue discussion that you just had. So, yeah, and in other companies, you might have been reprimanded for pushing that kind of a decision, but you did what's right. What's been your biggest personal challenge in your life?
To me, it's effectively how do we have 160,000 people, right, in our organization. And the biggest challenge is change, getting people to adapt to change. And that's very difficult. I always tell people, normally you say behave like adults, and we say behave like children because
Yeah,
children adapt to change better, right? And so, getting people, even our customers, AI, we are implementing AI. And where do you think the single biggest challenge is? Customers, at the mid-level pushback because they're not used to it. We work with a large automotive company,
no,
and
it scares them.
and
Right.
they have an Excel spreadsheet with which they allocate vehicles to dealers. And we are, using leveraging AI, we automated it completely. But the team pushed back and they said, no, how are we sure this is right? We can't take it. And it took 3 years to get it implemented. So change management is the single biggest challenge. The
And patience, it seems
and
like
patient.
as well. Yeah, that's a good one. What's your advice to people who want to come and work for you, the younger crowd, let's call them? What do you want to see from them?
What we would like to see is grit, determination, passion, and a desire to do something different, a desire to be exceptional. And if you come with this raw material, right, Tech Mahindra is such a great enterprise for you to mold yourself. Right,
Right.
we work with Fortune 1000 clients, the best of opportunities, and when you come in with this mindset, you can make magic happen.
How do you define grit? What do I need to do to be gritty? There's been books written on it, but how do you put it in a tagline? What are
Sorry,
we looking for?
can you repeat the question?
Grit. You mentioned grit. What does that mean in terms of someone coming to you? What do you want to see from these young recruits?
I see it in them every day. When they come in, they're so passionate about wanting to change the world that when they come in, many times we give them work and they finish. We think it will take a day, and they finish it in three-fourths of a day and say, "What's my next work?" Right? And
I
so
love it.
we have these people really, embrace, the RISE tenets, as I call, and they're really, scaling up.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. CTL, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dean. It was wonderful talking to you, and I'll love to stay in touch. And I've seen your podcast; you're doing a great job, and I'm so excited that I was a part of your
Yeah,
podcast today.
definitely want to come and do a tour. Maybe we'll start with Detroit, move on to India.
Wonderful.
You've been listening to to Lakshmanan Chidambaram, who is you can call him CTL now that you know him. This is Dean Tobias with the Reboot Chronicles. I want to thank you for joining us today. We'll see you soon.